scream out the idea of perspective. A person that's more in tune with the Torah, he has a different perspective that's more in tune perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rabbi Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's Parshas Shoftim, I want to suggest a certain mahalach to a question I had already for many years. And the Mirtzeh Hashem will learn out of the answer the importance of listening to Chazal, especially when we reach certain situations in our life that we don't have 100% clarity what the right thing is to do in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the importance of going to a Talmid Chacham or Gadol Ador to help us make that decision. And the Mirtzeh Hashem will also close with a story that will have a mashal that will help us to get more into the mood of Elul. So we'll start. It says in our parsha the importance of listening to Chazal, to our sages, that they will interpret the Torah to us, and we have to abide by what they're saying. And here is the punchline: Lo tasur mimenu yamin u'smol. You have to ensure that you won't turn from the word they are telling us, right or left. That's a simple understanding. Interesting. The simple understanding is just listen to what they say. Don't turn right or left. Just go straight with what they say. However, all the Mefarshim bring the famous Midrash, and Rashi is one of them, that says what this really means is that even if they tell you on something that to you seems like it's right and they tell you it's left or vice versa, go with what they say. And the obvious question number one is, why is it being taken out of the context? If you look at the pasuk, the simple understanding of the pasuk is just go with what they tell you. Go with what Chazal are telling you. They're explaining to you what the Torah means, and that's it. Who said that even if they tell us something that's right, that seems to be left, that we have to go with them? It doesn't really say that in the pasuk. That's question number one. Question number two, after we pass question number one and we answer it, we still could ask a very interesting question. This is the question that's been bugging me for many years, and that is, if you want to tell me that no matter what I have to listen to what Chazal tell us, what Talmidei Chachamim tell us, even if it seems to me that right is left and the left they're saying is right, why do we use it and express it by the words right and left? Why not top, bottom? Why not black? Even if they tell me black is white and white is black. There must be something unique about right and left. And I want to suggest the following. First of all, if you look in Siftei Chachamim, he's bothered by the first question. Why is it that the Mefarshim, and he's specifically speaking about Rashi, why is he taking it out of context? And he answers, because if all they're doing is telling us this is what the Torah is saying, it doesn't make sense to say right and left. You could say you could do the right thing, which is what they're telling us to do, or the wrong thing. What's right and left? It's not shayach, it's not relevant. But I want to suggest another answer that will answer the first question and the second question, and that is, the uniqueness of right and left is that it screams out the idea of perspective. If I'm still standing in a certain point, then the object relative to me could be right, whereas relative to you could be left. And even more so, if we're standing one across from the other, my right, for you it's left, and your left for me is right. This is a way to scream out that Chazal got, in their infinite wisdom, and we'll explain why that is, because they're so in tune with the Torah and Ratzon Hashem, they can have a different perspective that's more in tune with the Torah and more in tune what HaKadosh Baruch Hu would like us to do. To take this symbolism even further, I will tell you where you actually see this idea in the Torah. When Yaakov comes to Mitzrayim and is literally about to go into the next world, so Yosef, his son, comes to him with his two kids, the grandchildren of Yaakov, which, as we all know, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe was the older one, and Ephraim was the younger one. And he brings them to his father Yaakov to give them a bracha before he passes away, as was accustomed to do. And of course, the right thing is that the older boy, which was Menashe, should be on the right side of Yaakov, because it's more important, more chashuv. Whereas the younger child, Ephraim, should be on the left side of Yaakov. And that's exactly what Yosef did. However, we all know this famous episode where Yaakov crisscrosses his hands and makes sure that the more important bracha will be given to the younger child, which is not Menashe, but rather Ephraim. And Yosef says, what's going on? I think you're making a mistake. And Yaakov answers him, I'm not making a mistake. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know that that is right and that is left, but I also know something you don't know, because I have a perspective you don't have. And in this situation, the perspective is not necessarily because it's more in tune with Torah, so he's seeing it from a different perspective, but he also has the sixth sense or element that he gets from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Ruach HaKodesh. And he was able to see that in the future, that there'll be more important people coming out of the younger son, which is Ephraim. That will be Yeshua, that will be the leader after Moshe Rabbeinu, as opposed to the older child, which is Menashe, that'll have Gideon coming out of him. And hence, he said, I know, but you don't realize that I know more than you. And hence, what seems to be right to you is left to me. And what seems to be left to you is actually right for me. And in this case, the person on the right that should get the more important bracha should be the younger child, which is Ephraim and not Menashe. And Baruch Hashem, they were very happy with it. And because Ephraim and Menashe accepted it willingly, then they were zoiche that all our sons, we give them a bracha on Friday night, Ephraim uche Menashe, etc., etc. So you see again, this deep symbolism of right and left being different perspectives of how you can view things. I'm not getting into the question, what exactly is the geder of afilu omrim al yamin shu smol and smol shul yamin. That's a machlokes rishonim I'm not going to get into. What I want to dwell upon is, what is this idea that the Torah decided to describe it as right and left, and not left and right? And the answer is, that we're suggesting, is that right and left scream out the idea of perspective. A person that's more in tune with the Torah, he has a different perspective that's more in tune with the real emes perspective, which is the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to that, as well, there are two elements. Element number one is a simple understanding of what we just said, which is that they're more in tune. Their perspective is different because it's more in tune with the Torah. And to that, why is that true? That's because not only do they have so much Torah in them, and the more Torah they have, obviously the more in tune they are with what Hashem would want us to do in certain situations in life, but there's another important parameter that people are perhaps less aware of. And that is, the less you have in your mind of other stuff, of media, of what's happening, what you hear from different people, the less you have of that, the less it's going to affect your dots and your decision making. And hence, it's going to be also more Torah and not a combination of Torah and something else. And hence, we go to these people that are more in tune with Torah and less with anything else. And that will give us a pure guideline to decide and to understand the decision that is more in tune with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there's another aspect of that, and that is the Ruach HaKodesh, that they can see things. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives magic in their lips, as the Gaon Mevilna says on the pasuk in Mishlei Tet Zayin Yud. It says over there, She'al pnei melech yesh kesem. On the face of a king, there's magic, and hence, v'lachen lo to'im b'mishpat, and hence they don't make a mistake when they give a judgment call. And the Gaon Mevilna explains, who's a melech? We all know in many places we see that melachim al talmidei chachamim, they're referred to as kings. There's a similar pasuk in Kohelet that says, umatok ha'or v'tov la'inayim. Matok ha'or is Torah, we know. It's a metaphor for Torah. And the Torah creates light in our eyes that we can see what the right decision is. Meaning the Torah does something special, aside from giving us the more in tune perspective with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it also gives a special magic, Ruach HaKodesh, to be able to make the right decisions. Just to elaborate on that second point, my Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Kamenetz Shlita, that taught me in Pnei Embark and Netivot Olam, he said to me the following. He says, if you look carefully, there's many instances in Gemaras where the story goes as follows. They came to the Rav, they asked the Shaila, he gave them a psak, and then someone else said, excuse me, isn't the Rav making a mistake? We learned not like that. And he was embarrassed. Indeed, it seemed like he made a mistake. But the next day they come and they say, Rebbe, we just noticed another piece of information about the scenario that we asked about, which we were not aware of until now. And based on that information, indeed the psak, what he told him to do was right, even though he didn't even know about it. And it seemed to be a mistake. But it was a planned mistake that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ensured that the Talmud Chacham, the Rav, would say that psak, because that is what the person that asked the question needed to hear as an answer. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure that the Talmud Chacham, the Rav, will be the kli, the vessel through which we hear what the right thing in the eyes of Hashem is for us to do. And hence, it's very good to go to a Rav because he's more in tune with what Hashem wants us to do. And we also have this, in Hebrew it's called check bitachon. We have a security check that whatever happens after we do what the Rav told us, we can say we did what the Rav said, and the Rav is more in tune with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if we summarize, we answered both our questions. We asked, why are Chazal taking the pasuk out of context? Shouldn't it just mean we should do what Chazal tell us based on how they're teaching us what the Torah means, and that's it, and don't go from it right or left? That was question number one. To that we answered no, then it's not grammatically correct to call that right or left. It just say, do as they tell you to do. The fact that it says right and left screams out that even though something from your perspective seems right and their perspective or left, and they're telling you it's right, you have to listen to them. And also, why right and left and not black or white or top and bottom? Because right and left screams out this idea of perspective. It's a different perspective, and we have to go with their perspective and not our perspective, because they're more in tuned. The story is about a Bachur named Ephraim that learned in the certain yeshiva, in the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And 2 weeks before the end of this month, suddenly he gets an abrupt phone call from his mother saying, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you the bad news, but your grandfather, my father, is very sick now, and perhaps it's the right thing for you to come home." So he runs to his Rav and he says, "Maybe it's the right thing for me to come home because my grandfather's sick. I feel like it's the right thing for me to go home." The Rav saw he was in a lot of distress and he felt his pain, but he said, after thinking about it, "I really think the right thing to do is for you to stay here, and the learning you will do for the next 2 weeks will be the best thing for your grandfather." But Ephraim couldn't take it. He says, "What? The Rav doesn't really understand me. I don't think he understands the situation," like unfortunately many people say. "And hence, I gotta go. I'm just gonna go." And he abruptly ran, literally, to get a cab. He went to the airport and he flew. He bought a plane, he bought a ticket and he flew. And because of the hour change, he didn't even have a chance to update his family. And as he's in the flight, he suddenly feels a bit regret. "Oh no, I went against what the Rav told me to do. I can't believe I did this." And as he lands, he sees that he has like 5 missed calls and he has voice messages. And before he could even pick up those messages, he suddenly gets a call from his mother. "Hi Ephraim, we've been trying to call you. I have bad news for you. Saba passed away. Baruch Hashem, you're in Eretz Yisrael and you didn't come, and you can help us with all the logistics in arranging for the Levaya because he asked us to ensure he gets buried in Eretz Yisrael." He did not know where to put himself. He could not believe he didn't listen to his Rav. He had no choice but to tell his mother the truth of what happened, that he decided to come, even though his Rav told him not to, because he really felt like he needed to come. And right now he has no choice. He's going to just do a turnaround and go to another plane to go back to Eretz Yisrael. As he gets to Eretz Yisrael, they all go to the funeral. It was a very modest funeral because of the Levaya, not many people were there. But suddenly came this big Rav, who was his Rav, the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir at the time, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Zatzal. He came there and Ephraim didn't know where to put himself. He was ready to get yelled at. And he thought to himself, and deservingly so, "I went against what the Rav told me to do. He's the Rosh Yeshiva that paskened for me to not to fly." But instead of that, he just gave him a hug, a warm hug, and he told him, "You must be hungry, you must be dizzy, you must be fatigued. Right after the Levaya, I want you to come to my house. I already told my household to prepare for you a warm meal, and then you can go to sleep." You see from here, not only the sixth sense that we're talking about, that Chazal have, the magic they have, the Ruach HaKodesh from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Talmidei Chachamim have, but also their unbelievable midot. They realized that the rebuke was not needed to be said anything, and that'll come on its own. We'll put things in perspective. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on The Prism of Torah.